Using important landmarks in SEO, geotargeting, and social media, SG, AI, and now the artificial intelligences, whose names you've probably heard, and their various applications. Well, this is probably the very first time you're hearing about the concept of landmarks, and you might not even fully understand what a landmark truly is. Well, it's not an entirely new concept, but typically it hasn't been extensively discussed or widely talked about much in the Persian language, and consequently, people aren't very familiar with its implications or applications. Landmarks are actually one of the fundamental and significant uses of the semantic web, providing crucial structural and contextual information. In other words, when your valuable content is intricately intertwined and deeply integrated with your web page, your entire HTML page becomes much more prominent and significantly more impactful in the digital landscape. We truly see their absolutely essential and fundamental role when we are discussing in detail how the various and distinct parts of a web page absolutely need to be profoundly meaningful and highly understandable for web crawlers, for advanced artificial intelligence systems, and for all those sophisticated bots. This comprehensive understanding is crucial so they can perform the best possible and most accurate analysis of our content, ensuring it is properly indexed and effectively utilized across the internet. So essentially, crucial landmarks alongside detailed semantic tags, along with those fundamental semantic concepts we previously discussed, collectively complete the comprehensive picture of how various different types of sophisticated bots operating within the vast and intricate world of the internet can more profoundly and accurately understand our digital content and subsequently present it much more effectively and relevantly to a wider audience. Alright, I have a drawing here that visually illustrates these interconnected components and their synergistic roles. I have a picture here that has divided things up into sections. Imagine a page from a website. Now, it doesn't matter whether it's the home page or any other page, it's been marked out with a series of lines and boundaries. So, we've previously talked about tags like the header tag and the footer tag, or maybe you're already familiar with them. We discussed them, and we know that when HTML5 was introduced, a number of new tags were added, such as header, footer, aside, article, main, navigation, and some other tags. But here we're only going to talk about the ones that are semantic. There are other tags as well, but for now we want to talk about those that have been added in the world of semantics and are used for semantic sectioning of your pages. So we usually have a header, we place that header inside the header tag. You might also print out an HR letterhead, or a company might give you one. It basically has a header, a date, a title, what the subject is, maybe a letter number. And that header should indicate that a set of information is included in it, just like what we mentioned. Now, on a website, it's a bit different. It might also include a menu. For example, it might contain the page title. Overall, although the tag is called header, we refer to these as banner-type landmarks. On our pages, we should have one banner, and this banner should explain what the page is about. Now, I don't want to go into details for now. I'll just talk about the general idea of why these were created in the first place. These landmarks were created both to support accessibility for applications and different people, and also to help with SEO so that crawlers can read them. Now, I've written an abbreviation here. ARIA, which stands for Web Accessibility Initiative, Accessible Rich Internet Applications. Now, it's a bit small here on the screen. I regrettably couldn't make it any bigger or more prominent for better visibility, but within the W3C consortium, there's a dedicated team called WAI that actually started something quite similar to this concept. Its goal has been to help both people with disabilities, like those with visual impairments, and also crawlers and robots, to better obtain information about the page. We hear a few terms. Role area label. I don't know. I say area because it's easier, but maybe it's pronounced area or something like that. Area label or area labeled by. You might hear such terms and attributes. Now let's go into the code and see together. Now I want to explain each one step by step. First of all, make sure to always use landmarks in your pages. We'll see together now how to detect them. Be sure to pay attention to how these landmarks are working. If you don't know how to use landmarks, just leave it. You don't have to use landmarks at all. Default landmarks have been introduced and used in HTML5, like the header and footer I mentioned to you. But can I have my own custom landmark? Yes. You can also define your own landmarks. Landmarks have a long history. They existed even before HTML5. In HTML4, these were the same landmarks. Now, these area labels or roles existed, but in HTML5 they became much more organized. In HTML4 they were quite messy. If you want to use them like this, it's not very appealing. Neither artificial intelligence understands it, nor do crawlers pick up on it, but maybe actually, for those friends who are, what's the right word? People with disabilities, the correct term escaped me. For people with disabilities, it might have been useful. Alright, let's take a look together to see what these are and how we should use them. Alright, I've made a list here. The header tag serves the same role as a banner, and when you use the header tag, it automatically takes on the banner role. So, a default role has been defined for this tag. You don't need to use the role attribute at all. Just defining it like this tells it that it's the banner of the page. There are some points to note. Technically, in your HTML, you can have more than one header, but try to make sure that your main header or main banner of the page is just one. Why am I saying main? Is there actually a difference? Yes. For example, you can use header tags for your section tags. Notice I'm saying section. You can add a header and footer to your section tags. But in that case, this header and this banner are no longer the main ones. Why? Because they are not used or created directly and immediately after your body tag. So the main header comes immediately after the body tag. The first header that appears in the body will be your main header. The header has a rule. It must have at least one heading to introduce itself because, as you can see, no label has been assigned to it. No role attribute has been written for it. The very first heading, whether it's an H1, an H6, or indeed whatever other heading element you might choose to use, on your web page is actually recognized as its primary label, its fundamental role, and its essential purpose. Let's take a look at an example to see what it's like. For example, this particular page that we currently have open, there's an incredibly useful extension that I really like. Quite recently, it has also thoughtfully added this new section as well. The heading map extension has added landmarks. We can see that landmarks have been recognized on this page. The banner landmark has been recognized. It says the role is banner. The element is a header. The element is our header tag, and it's showing an error in red. Do you see? It says it must be unique. Definitely, in your main banner or your main header that belongs to the page, unless it appears in a section, but we're not talking about that section, there should be only one. It must be unique. You see, here in Iran, this particular problem unfortunately exists. Specifically, two distinct banners have been prominently placed. The presence of these two separate headers precisely causes your automated crawler, the bot, to be severely hindered and not to be able to properly recognize things. Which one is the main banner? Okay, I have one banner, which is this one. And I have another banner, which is this one. This banner and this banner. Which one is the main one? Logically, the second one should be removed. The first one is recognized as the main banner, or the main role banner. Alright, let's move on to the next one. We have a navigation tag that was introduced in HTML5. What is its role? It's for navigation, and we see the nav tag being used in this way. Again, there's no need to add an attribute. In the past, for example, we used to put a div and write div role nav or navigation. Now you don't need to do that anymore. HTML5 handles this itself. It assigns the role automatically. It's absolutely necessary for the nav to have a heading inside it. You can set its heading to display none. Why? So it can introduce itself. So it can say what it's about. That's the point of semantics. You can also use aria label for it. Definitely, if you have multiple navigation elements, I'm saying in this particular case, make sure to do this. If you have multiple navigation elements on your web page, make sure to add a clear and descriptive label for each of them. You'll see it says this is the main navigation, this one is the footer navigation, and you might have many navigations. Don't think of navigations as just drop-down menus or mega menus. Navigation should be simple. In my opinion, navigation is just these very simple ULLIs that guide the user or the bot to the main paths. Those menus that we usually have on our websites, for example, think about the Digicala menu. That doesn't actually navigate. It doesn't actually guide you. For example, think about Waze. Or consider Nishan, Balad, and similar apps. They tell you step by step, first go onto this street, then get on this highway, then go onto this other street, then into this alley, and you'll reach your destination. There's an order to it. That's how navigation works. It doesn't just dump everything in front of you at once and say, okay, you have to take these highways, you have to go here. It doesn't give you a sequence or order, it just gives you everything at once, like the Digicala menu. Now you might be able to find what you need with that drop down, but usually navigation should be very simple, at least for the crawler. So, as we said, there should be several navigations. You definitely have to use that thing. We need to use the ARIA label. Let's see what Iran host has. You see here it has a navigation. You see the navigation role, the nav element, they've put something like this here. And now with JS, it's really nice and has submenus. It's a simple menu. We call this a simple menu. We don't call it a very crowded menu. We don't call it a crowded navigation. Alright, next. Main. Be sure to use the main tag. I see and I know that a lot of developers don't use the main tag. They say, what do we need it for? Whereas your main content. Look, check out this picture. Your main content is here. See, roll, banner. Here they've put 2. But we're saying it should just be 1. Now, I don't know why they've put 2 here. This is the picture. Your main content, which has a main role, absolutely must be placed here. Let's say it's an article. The main part of the article has to be inside this. For a landing page like this, the main point you want to convey must be placed inside this. For example, if we consider all of this as a banner, your main content should be placed here from this point onward. Then, for instance, you might bring in these as side content, which would go into a tag called aside. So the main content still goes inside this same main. There can only be one main. Don't go and put 10 mains. The main tag doesn't necessarily need to have a heading. It can perfectly well be without a heading and things like that. The complementary role or the aside tag that we're looking at together, side content that's related to your main content. Aside must always have a heading inside it. Again, there's no need for an area label. And as we said, the role attribute is kind of outdated now, so don't use role too much. Let me give you another tip. Don't try to put a ton of these in. For example, when you look at your landmarks, don't have a bunch of different things. You should define fewer than 10, ideally fewer than 8 landmarks. You're not supposed to turn everything here into a landmark. Okay, as we said, aside is for supplementary content. For example, if we're talking about hosting, you can put the FAQs in an aside. You can also put things like the latest articles, comments, and similar items in your aside. Can you have more than one aside on a page? Yes. When you have multiple asides, just like with navigation, make sure to use an area label. For example, you might have one for user comments, another for the latest articles, another for something else. Make sure to clearly specify each of these. Look, for these, whatever they are, if they're not predefined things, just write something clear in English that describes that section. Okay, the footer is for content info, where you usually see copyright, contact information, and things like that. It gets placed there, as you can see, and it's really simple. As we mentioned before, the footer typically goes right here at the bottom of the page. The article element, of course, we don't usually consider the article element itself as a landmark unless it contains distinct sections or specific regions inside it. But definitely if you have the main article or content that you want to put inside your main and you see that it's text or you have some text, make sure to put it inside an article element. An article must also definitely have a heading inside it. But you can also section or region your article. As I mentioned before, if you see that your article is divided into chapters, or it has different semantic parts, you should always be sure to properly section your content, and it is also very important to make sure that each and every section additionally has a clear and descriptive heading. The primary landmark that is considered for a section is typically a region or a specific semantic part, and it is generally used in this particular way. Can we have multiple sections? Yes. Can we have a header and footer inside a section? Yes. The header and footer elements which are utilized within a specific section are no longer considered the primary or main landmarks of the entire page. Instead, they are now recognized as significant landmarks that are an integral part of your particular section or article content. Are there other landmarks as well? Yes, there are form landmarks and search landmarks. As you can see, if we define a simple form and set the area label attribute as form, for example, you can see that the form tag is recognized as a landmark. And here we've labeled it. You also see a form with the role of search here. If you assign it the search role, it becomes a search landmark, and your site search will be placed here. How many can we have? You can have more than one, there's no problem, but it's generally preferred to have just one search on your page. So, when are ARIA label and ARIA labeled by used? ARIA label is used when, for example, you're defining a section. Or, for example, you are defining an aside that, visually speaking, doesn't really have any discernible content at all. If it doesn't have any visual content, we use ARIA label and explain what it's about. It's usually an additional description, a specific tag or attribute that gives more comprehensive information about your element. Area labeled by is primarily used when you want to explicitly associate one element with another. This is typically how you would write it, allowing for clear and accessible connections between different parts of your web content. For example, allow me to introduce a specific HTML division element. For instance, I can illustrate this by stating that I possess a division element that is explicitly equipped with an ARIA labeled by attribute. This particular attribute is crucial for accessibility, as it establishes a relationship between the division and another element that serves as its label. Now, in this precise manner, for example, we also have a corresponding label element that is identified by a unique ID. For instance, if the specific ID assigned to this label element is 112, then in this context we would precisely write 112 as the value for the area labeled by attribute within our division element, thereby linking them semantically. I say this is related to that. This division is labeled by this. Now, besides a label, it can also be a label tag. Now, inside the label tag, I wrote something, so whenever we want to semantically connect two elements together, we do this. With area label, it's not about connecting anymore. It's a descriptive element that typically isn't a visual component, but in the specific case of a label, it is indeed a highly visual and clearly discernible element that we can readily observe on the page. Overall, these significant landmarks profoundly assist us in appearing much more effectively and with greater ease in prominent Google search results, and on the other hand, they also provide substantial assistance to artificial intelligence systems. When you inquire about how we can prominently appear within the AI overview, this comprehensive approach significantly helps you achieve that objective.